Bishop or knight? Queen or two rooks? What's stronger? If you're looking to make more favourable trades and ultimately win more games, watch till the end and you'll have all the answers. This is International Master YF Chess, and today we'll be revealing the true value of each chess piece. If you find this useful, please smash the like button and subscribe for more chess content. And before you watch the video, comment below with your chess goal. This video is sponsored by my girlfriend on her chess journey to beat her boyfriend. Before we get to the good stuff, let me speed through some important fundamentals. As beginners, we're taught the values of each piece, with pawns weakest at 1 point, knights and bishops similar at 3 points, rooks are stronger at 5 points, queen strongest at 9 points, as she's essentially a rook and bishop in one, and the king is priceless, so he gets a sideways 8. It's worth noting, knights and bishops are called minor pieces, rooks and queens major pieces. The total points you have are also called material, so if you have a material advantage, it means you have a better army, and generally bigger chances to win. But of course, it's possible for a smaller army to come out on top, especially because the king is the end goal in chess. Hence why grandmasters will sacrifice material in the right situations. So why is a rook stronger than a bishop or knight? Well, generally, rooks will control more squares. In fact, on an open board, rooks always control 14 squares. Bishops control between 7 to 13, and knights control between 2 to 8. You can also mate with just king and rook, but not king and bishop or king and knight. Okay, what about the age-old question of bishop versus knight? Based on just square control on an open board, bishops are better and are longer range, but the position is not always open. Knights are a different breed, being the only piece that can jump over other pieces. The other big drawback of bishops is that they can only ever control half of the board, light or dark squares, whilst knights can reach every single square. The pros and cons roughly balance each other out, so bishops and knights are considered similar value for beginners at 3 points. To sum up, 1359 is a great starting point, but it leaves many questions unanswered and will only take you so far. There are two fundamental issues with the beginner system. First off, Messi is better than Ronaldo, and bishops are better than knights. It does depend on the position, but in general, bishops are undisputedly better than knights. Just like how Ronaldo may be better in the air for headers, but Messi is still the overall GOAT. And if you don't believe me, that's fair enough, but you should believe these guys. Two former chess world champions and GOATs, Bobby Fischer and Garry Kasparov, Stockfish, the strongest conventional chess engine, and Google DeepMind's AlphaZero, the strongest engine at chess using artificial intelligence. Here are the relative values these legends used. For Stockfish, the engine's piece valuations depend heavily on the position, and these values are the endgame valuations. For AlphaZero, it doesn't actually assign values to pieces, so these values are back calculated from AlphaZero games. Links are in the description if you're interested and horny for a geekgasm. If you compare the knight and bishop values, the greatest human and computer minds all value bishops higher. And if you're still not convinced, let me show you some data based on over 4 million competitive games from Kaiserbase, put together by Patrick Colombe, PhD. Looking at games where two bishops battled against bishop and knight, the two bishops had a noticeably higher win rate. And if we look at games with two bishops against two knights, the bishop win rate was even higher. So why are bishops better than knights? Well, for starters, you can force checkmate with king and two bishops, but not king and two knights. Bishops can also dominate knights when they are on the edge, controlling all the squares the knight can move to. And even if the knight is better placed, it's easy to counter and control a knight with a bishop using this same geometry. Then there's the two bishop or bishop pair combination, which is overpowered. It can reach every square efficiently and completely dominates the board in an open position effortlessly. Grandmasters generally value the bishop pair as half a pawn and will fight ferociously to win the bishop pair. More generally, bishops are more versatile thanks to the long range, as they can contribute to fights on multiple fronts, and are less reliant on having outposts like knights. I'd recommend using Fisher's valuations, increasing the bishop value to 3.25. This is what I personally use, and many strong grandmasters use as a guideline. Just one moderation from the beginner 1359, but a very important one. The second fundamental issue is that all piece values are situational. Just like how a sword is better than a bow and arrow in close quarters, but pretty useless at long range. A knight is better in close positions, whilst bishops are better in open positions. Chess is super complex, with every position being different, but let me summarize some general concepts for each piece. Starting with open positions, where the knight doesn't necessarily perform worse, but the long-range pieces are of course stronger. Closed positions are where the knight really shines, whilst bishops and rooks struggle to contribute. Queens may also struggle, but because of their better maneuverability even in closed positions, we'll leave them as neutral. In openings, knights are easily developed, leading the initial skirmishes, whereas rooks are notoriously difficult to develop. By the middle game, knights are still playing huge roles, but usually the position starts opening up with opportunities for the bishop and rooks to come into play. And in endgames, rooks start to take the spotlight thanks to their versatility. They are particularly strong at supporting friendly passed pawns or stopping enemy passed pawns when placed behind the pawn. And if they can reach the enemy's 7th rank, effects are usually devastating. Queens are highly situational, but their power curves are less dependent on game phases, so we'll leave them as neutral for the 3 game phases. All pieces are good attackers, but the queen is exceptionally strong at checkmating. Whereas on defense, the queen is weaker, because her high value means you rarely want to trade or sacrifice her to protect the king. On the other hand, the geometry, low value, and ability to cover all squares of knights makes them excellent defenders. And finally, we often see battles on 2 fronts in chess. This could be a race to checkmate each other when castled on opposite sides, or maybe an endgame with pawns on both sides of the board. The knight is weaker in these situations, whilst long-range pieces can often contribute on both fronts. For example, a bishop on the long diagonal could be a fantastic defender and attacker. Okay, so as an example, a rook in an open endgame able to get into a good position to contribute on 2 fronts might be worth closer to 6 instead of 5. There will of course be exceptions, as these are general guidelines. For example, a knight in a closed position could be terrible if it's stuck on a useless square, closer to a 2 than a 3. So try to talk to each individual piece to get more accurate piece valuations in your games. Some other points worth mentioning include bishops are worth more when you have both. If one is traded, the other loses some value from 3.25 to say 3.1. So try to trade a knight for your opponent's bishop pair and keep your own. Bishops are also highly dependent on pawn positions. Good bishops have friendly pawns on opposite coloured squares, whereas if pawns are on the same coloured squares, that's a bad bishop as he's blocked in. I call them tall pawns. If you have a bad bishop, try to either activate it or trade it off, and keep your opponent's bad bishop on the board. And keep in mind, before you castle, unmoved rooks have an additional unique value in that they offer the option to castle. AlphaZero's classical chess games value rooks at 5.63, whereas in no castle chess, where castling is not allowed, rooks are valued at much less, 5.02. The final and most important section is all about evaluating material imbalances, where the total points are roughly equal, but the pieces are different. So who wins when 2 armies of similar strength but very different compositions battle? Some of the most common imbalances in approximate descending order are rook pawn versus 2 minor pieces, queen pawn versus 2 rooks, minor piece versus 3 pawns, and queen versus rook minor pawn, or 3 minor pieces. Let's call left side with the bigger pieces big side and right side with the smaller pieces small side. First off, knight and bishop are stronger than rook and pawn, so stop making this exchange without good reason. As you now know, you are trading 6.25 for 6, and usually knights and bishops are stronger than rooks in openings and middle games. Usually, you need rook and 2 pawns for knight and bishop in the opening or middle game for a fair trade. Okay, Now let me share the golden rule for material imbalances. If the smaller pieces are coordinated, small side wins. Otherwise, big side comes up on top. For example, queen cannot defend a pawn against two coordinated rooks, but can fork and wreak havoc against uncoordinated rooks. Three connected passed pawns can't be stopped by a minor piece, but three isolated pawns will be easily mopped up. So before you make these exchanges, always consider how coordinated small side can be after the exchange. And once you enter battles with material imbalances, if you're small side you should be focusing on coordination, and if you're big side you should be a right pain. Sleep with enemy pieces to cause internal conflict and disarray. An advanced but frequently game-deciding concept is the coordinating piece. Often small side has a key piece which facilitates coordination. In this case, small side should try to keep the coordinating piece on the board. Great example is rook pawn versus rook bishop knight. Small side generally has the advantage, and small side's rook is the coordinating piece. If it gets traded, often the tide turns and big side does better in rook pawn versus bishop knight only. Good luck crushing the unlucky noobs who haven't seen this video. Please do like, sub and share with your chess friends. It honestly means a lot and keeps me pumped to make more chess content. And let me know in the comments what videos you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching YF Chess. Check out these 10 mistakes every amateur makes if you haven't already.